Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, people of the world. It's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Philter. I'm joined by a guest that said he was waiting for his invite for a year. I told everyone they're more than welcome to join me on the podcast, but I'm extremely proud of this young man. He is a recent Mason alum, so shout out to him. We're both alum now. Mr. Jalen Stubbs, introduce yourself to the listeners.
Hey, Philip, thanks for having me, man. I like how you mentioned waiting for the invite. I'm just open to whatever, but I appreciate you for having me. But yes, as he said, I'm now a Mason alum, class of 2023. I was a communications major and a sports communication minor at the illustrious George Mason University.
Yeah, and it's not his first podcast. I think one time he was on a national podcast for Chronicle of Higher Ed. So he's got the podcast circuit covered. But we're at a conference right now. We're at a conference called Get in the Game Conference related to sports. And so we're really going to dive into, one, a little bit of the experience here at this conference, but two, his experience as a student getting into the sport industry and what he did as a student. We're going to focus on your student experience, if that's okay. So, Jalen, take us to your Mason story of how you got involved with communications and then additionally thinking about diving into the sports aspect.
Yeah, well, circling back, what drew me to Mason the most was the diversity. I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, and I already knew how to thrive in such a diverse community. And of all the other schools I was looking at, George Mason University was the most diverse. And so I knew this would be a place where I could really stand out and express my passions and my talent and showcase all of my work there and just be the impact to really just make my mark there at George Mason. So what got me into sports journalism was after high school. While in high school, I took a journalism class, and that really got me into writing and storytelling. And then I was a huge fan of sports, and so I put the two together, and then that brought me to working for the Fourth Estate at George Mason, going into my sophomore year.
Oh, good. Keep going. I'm sorry. Yeah.
And a lot of opportunities that it brought, from becoming the staff writer to managing editor to sports editor, was really I got to learn how to work in the space, work in the publication environment, in the newsroom. And I had the opportunity to travel to different conferences, interview various athletes in the A10 conference and coaches, sit in press rooms and create reels, do stand-ups, do highlights, all the things, and more things, host events with sports as well. So it's been a journey, but I was blessed to have those opportunities.
So when you said, I love this story. So, I mean, you're very athletic. You don't see this gentleman, but he's very athletic. Did you play sports yourself in high school? And then what made you decide, like, you're playing sports, you want to write about sports?
So, yeah, I did track and basketball in high school. I started with track. I did the JV team. I was on the JV team my sophomore year. Didn't get much playing time, but then come the end of my sophomore year of high school, I got into outdoor track and field, and I just fell in love with it immediately. I did triple jump, long jump, and the 100 meter and the 200 meter.
So you're doing track. That was your main sport in high school, was track. When did you start in high school? Would you cover and write about the football team? So you stopped doing started doing the coverage of the football team for your writing part?
Yes. So I was still participating in sports while covering other sports as well.
Yeah.
So I did the football team. I covered a little bit of girls volleyball.
Okay.
I did a little bit of soccer as well. So a mix of everything, except one rule that we had at my high school in particular: we weren't allowed to cover the sport that we were participating in.
Yeah, makes
so
sense.
I couldn't cover track and field
makes sense.
at all.
So where were those clips and writings for your high school? Was it in a school paper, or where after you wrote, where did it go?
So it was called the RM Tide, and a lot of my writing, a lot of my work is published on that website. It's probably in the 2018, 2019 sections from my junior to senior year. So that's where you would find that for all of my high school writing.
Okay, and then when you got to George Mason, you said it was your sophomore year that you got involved with Forfeit State. Mm-hmm. Was there a reason that you didn't do it your freshman year right off the bat, or, why sophomore year when you started? What was the gap there?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked. So coming into college, I already knew what I wanted to do. I already knew that I wanted to get into writing for sports, storytelling, multimedia, and things like that. I just didn't know who to speak to, who to talk to about it. And so I also had different priorities by freshman year. I wanted to walk on the track and field team. Didn't work out. I only went to a couple of unattached meets. But come my sophomore year, Jason Hartzell, who's with student media, mm-hmm. I took one of his intros to journalism courses, and there was only about 3 or 4 students in that class, including me. But towards the end of the year, we had this big project where we had to interview students about COVID. We had to write an article about the impact students had, or the impact COVID had on students, excuse me. So I interviewed a student, got the article together. He really liked it, and he told me about the Fourth Estate. So he really helped me get my foot in the door. And then, towards my junior and senior, that's what got me to
you was doing it. Because I saw that intel, and we met. Did we meet your sophomore year? When did we meet at the first chess thing?
It might have been freshman or sophomore year.
Like coming out of the COVID, right?
Right.
Because your first real year was in COVID. Right. And then I guess
towards the second semester of my first year, that March was COVID. So
by the time I met you, you were already connected. I think you were already connected to Troy, and you were already doing going to mentorship events. But then you started writing and stuff. After that, you was writing, because by the time I met you, you was writing a lot, having articles and putting articles on Fourth Estate, doing the social media. So take us to a normal day, for a student that's out there. One, how would you suggest they get plugged in as a student to their school publication? And two, take us through a day in the life of a student, student newsroom. Like, what's it like when you were a student doing all these articles and stuff like that?
Yeah, of course. So as far as getting plugged in, you want to look on your website, look on find the student media website. In order to do that, you want to also make sure you're attending Get Connected fairs. So Mason, I believe they have those like twice a year. Yeah. So if you find the student or even the Department of Communications, reach out to them, ask them, what can I do to showcase my talent and to have that impact here at Mason. And so they will get you plugged in. They'll help you. They should allow you to get to where you need to maneuver through student media as well. So that's the biggest thing. Just you really have to take initiative about putting yourself out there, because no one is going to do it for you.
Yeah, or tell you where the stats. I saw that, right? Like, I worked with so many students, and it was like, it wasn't like an assignment to get writing. You had to write on your own and kind of pitch yourself a little bit. So then, what was the day like? Like, now that junior, senior year, what was it like going to class? Like, tell us, you go to class and you go to a sporting event. Like, take us through a day in the life of a student journalist. Of
course. So I'll give you an example. On a day of men's basketball, the games are usually at 7. I have to be there an hour in advance. So after class, if I have a morning class or an early afternoon class, so after my class, I'll prep for that. I'll maybe go to the newsroom, do some research on, the stats, the players, what the coach has been doing to prep the players for the season and everything. And for me, I would have to be at the games about an hour in advance. Okay. And so from there, I would bring my credential, show it at the gate, and then that will get me to the media table.
The little table in the front. Yes. Yeah, I saw you there. So when you say prep before the game, like you're saying stats and rebounds and stuff like that, did you bring a notebook, or did you write it down on a piece of paper, your pre game notes, or what was that? Or put on a laptop?
Yeah.
Or what?
So for my pregame notes, what would work for me the best is I would always take my notes on a Google document.
Mm-hmm.
I would take pregame notes, and then during the game, I would take notes as well, as if I'm actually calling the game. But since I'm quote unquote a sideline reporter, I wouldn't necessarily be calling the game. They left that to the professionals. But what I would be doing, I would just be taking notes during the game. Again, looking at stats, anything that's just standing out during game time.
Tell me that.
Anything that just stands out. Like if we have Josh Oduro just dunking on someone or blocking someone, or Ronald Pilati, just the quickest fast break ever, just things like that. And then I would incorporate that whenever I was brought to the press box. I would ask them, because usually those would be the two athletes I would be interviewing. I would ask them, like, what was going on through your mind? Like, how did you know when to turn the tables and things like that, and just change the game for the evening? So those things will really help me in the interview process of taking those notes.
So you were hyper focused in the game. Like I mean, I ain't gonna lie, man. My ADD's off the chain. That's me. So I'd be looking all over, and I'd probably like not forget to write something down. Like how did you how do you hyper focus on a sport and write at the same time? Like what are some tips? Like how do you do that? Are you, like you said, you already kind of knew? Look at Josh Adore the whole game, and like focus on him and what he does, or what? How would you do that?
Yeah. So just key terms. So I'll have their name, just put down the key term, and then I'll maybe mention like how many they scored within this duration of time. So it's not like I'm writing full sentences with these bullets, because the game, like, with basketball, it's going to keep going whether you're on point or not. So it's just like anything that's just outstanding. I know that is what needs to go on the Google document that I would have before heading into the press room.
Is there like for sports writer, is there like a shorthand key, like you already knew, like you, instead of saying rebound, you say RBD, and is there like a little key thing, like you shorthand thing that you got kind of adapted to a system? I don't know. I just thought about that. Is that a real thing?
Yeah, occasionally. So how it works at the media tables is they'll have someone who print out the stats, and then they'll have what you just mentioned, like RBD and things like that. They'll have that mentioned on the stat sheet. And so I might occasionally write that down, either for my post-game highlight reel, or just mention it, or just type it in on my Google Doc for the interview, for the press room interview.
Now, I always see, too, what I've noticed a lot with reporters afterwards is that they record people. Like they have their like phone, or they have a thing. Did you do that with post-game?
Yes.
Like walk up to them with a microphone, like a mic, but say like to get quotes and stuff. Did you do that?
Yes. So I just use my voice recorder on my phone.
Yeah.
I would always make sure I'm sitting in the front.
Okay.
And I would just use my voice recorder for the phone to transcribe the interview and to use those for quotes in my articles.
Did you type out the transcription or upload it to an auto thing that would type it out for you?
I did. Autorio.
Yeah, Otter AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got
one of those.
Or one of those.
I started using that a little bit, and I had to use that for a big project I did for one of my classes, and also just listening. And you can ask any journalist this: when using a voice recorder and using these transcription apps, it's not always going to be as accurate as you would expect it to. So just like continuing to listen, I probably listen to my interviews at least 5 to 10 times, just trying to make sure I'm getting the right quotes. Because sometimes when the interviewee is saying something off that's just offsetting, it may pick up, the app might pick that up, and it's just not going to be too relevant. Yeah. So that's just a rule in journalism that we have.
So active listening, and don't like completely rely on the technology. It's a compliment, but not your whole thing. So you got this. So you're at the game. You got notes from the game, pre-game notes. When was the turnaround when you had to turn in the article?
A turnaround when I had to turn in the article.
Like actually, like you went to the game. When you had to turn it in? Was it like the next day, 24 hours, end of the week? What?
Within the hour.
The hour?
Within the hour. It depends. It depends on really like the game. So for homecoming, that's something like within the hour or within that day. I'd say I exaggerated within the hour,
but
definitely within the day, like for bigger games like that. But usually, it just needs to be before that Thursday of the week.
So the games are on Wednesday nights,
right? So by the next day, pretty much.
So if you went to a Wednesday night game, the article should be ready for Thursday.
Correct.
If you went to a Saturday game, whatever, should it be like it's done by Monday?
Tuesday.
Okay, so take us through that. So you get home, do you automatically start writing, or you sit on it for a little bit?
So for a Saturday game, what I'll do is I'll start writing for a little bit, but I usually try to do more background information, especially for like the larger feature stories, because I'll have more time during the weekend to actually, put together all the content that I need and use all my knowledge in that one article. Because a lot of times you want to make sure that our rule at the Fourth Estate is we need at least 400, a minimum of 400 words.
Okay.
And so that doesn't just come with quotes. We need background information. We have the pyramid rule where we have the most important information goes at the very top, and then the least relevant information you'll mention like at the very end.
Gotcha. For that, you're focusing on the writing, all that. Someone else will cover and get the pictures to add to the article, or you had to do both?
There were times I would have to do both. Other times we would have a photographer do it as well. Whenever I started writing for sports at the Fourth Estate, I had to do a lot of I had to take a lot of photos myself, and it wasn't too tedious. I would still get photo creds and everything. But once we actually hired a photographer with a professional camera, because I was just using my phone camera, once we actually hired a professional, well, not a professional, but a
staff member dedicated to it.
Yeah, a staff member dedicated. He actually had a professional camera, and it improved the quality of our articles. We got more attention with the articles because I don't know if you've noticed on the Fourth Estate, they give you a view count.
Yes, I see.
And so whenever we hired our photographer, the view count, I noticed a lot of the view counts in the sports articles and even the culture articles, within all the beats, it really increased.
Aesthetically, they were drawn to it
because it's a hook.
And then my next, I know one of the things that you did really well is that you would take the articles and put them on social and build. Did you do that, like the little mini teasers, and then to prepare your articles that would go on the Fourth Estate social media, or someone else would do the social part?
The social part, so as in with like Instagram.
Yeah, remember you did
right. So
articles
we did have a social media coordinator. I wasn't, or a social media associate person.
Yeah,
I wasn't running our Instagram page. Everything that I did, I just posted on
the real written one, and then they would do the teasers on Instagram and link it. Got it.
And I would just put it like on my stories and things like that.
Yes.
I'll put it on my Twitter and my LinkedIn as well.
Now, overcount. You sophomore to senior, how many articles do you think you wrote for Fourth Estate?
At least, I'd say at least 30.
30?
30 to 40.
30 to 40, okay. And then going to these conferences, we're at the Get in the Game conference, or just in general when you build your portfolio, how many do you have that you show to people? Because I know you ain't going to show them all 30.
How many would I show to people at this conference?
Or, like to employers. Like how many articles out of those 30 that you want to be your top clips that you send?
I would show them about 3.
3?
3 to 5.
3 to 5 out of 30?
Out of 30, yes.
So how did you determine which ones was that?
So part of the reason why I gave you such a small number was because a lot of employers are going to want to see. It's about timing, right? So when I send them my articles and things like that, you know how it is with HR and they go through resumes. They don't have time to look at a whole lot all day long. So I want to give them high quality articles. I want to give them just a handful of my very, very best work.
So you do the top viewed ones? Is that the ones you've been doing?
So either like the top viewed ones or the ones I know has had the most impact in the organization.
Impact. So like you said that, right? So you had to kind of measure that. And then now let's say this, right? You're graduated. Let's say you're graduated, you're networking. What would you tell someone to still continue to write? Do you still write and do your own blog, or how do you keep up with your writing skills if it's not attached to university?
Yeah, so I would just really just get the reps in. just write about. It can even be a game that you see on TV. You know, you don't always have to go to in-person professional or college games. It's football season now, and I've been going to even a couple of high school games, and you can still write about it and report about it. You can have as long as you have like a nice hook and everything. And as far as getting quotes, you may not have success getting quotes at certain games, but on TV, you know, you can practice just getting in those quotes and making sure that you're actually capturing what's being said.
Yeah, like if you went to a high school game, have you gone to this, right, high school game?
Yes.
Have you just gone up to the coach after the game and he would give you a quote?
Absolutely, you can do that.
They don't
too.
care.
You can do that too.
Like,
they don't care.
They don't care.
They're people at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You see a lot of these. You see a lot of these people on TV, and people are like, "Oh, you met this person, that person." Like over the summer, I met Malika Andrews and Kendrick Perkins, and I actually never thought I'd ever meet them, but at the end of the day, they're just people, and they're really cool people.
Did you write about that?
I didn't write about that, but I posted about it.
Oh, there you go. Okay, yeah.
I posted about it.
You posted about it, and then you asked them some questions. And stuff
I
like
just
that?
asked them. I asked them. The biggest thing that I was curious about with NBA today was what the culture is like, and it's very lively. Like it's not just like a business. It's a community. It's a family, and a lot of what goes on behind the scenes is kind of like any other business. They're just a well-known business.
Yeah. So with these high school games, have you pushed them to your local? Like I know, for instance, one student I worked with was submitting his articles to the Fairfax Times, so he would just go to high school football games and submit them. Have you been doing that with like your local Montgomery County Times? Or first of all, what football games are you going to? Montgomery County games or Fairfax games? Which ones are you going to?
So the most recent one I went to was the DeMatha game.
Okay, DeMatha game. That's big.
That was a few weeks ago.
That's big. That's a big name school too.
Yeah, big sports school. A lot of what I've been doing recently though was putting together reels, like video reels, as opposed to just writing. Because ultimately, I do want to be on air. I have experience with writing and working on air, but then also when you're trying to put together reels, you're getting the hands-on production reps, if you will, especially if you're doing it on your own.
Well, let's dive that in. Let's dive that back in. So you're a journalism student, sports journalism. But I think I did see you do some anchoring at the Mason Cable Network. So is that your main? Is that like you were doing the writing, you got all these 30 articles, but is that the main thing you really want to do? Is the anchoring?
That is
okay.
But they all come hand in hand. You know, if you're a good writer, you'll be a good public speaker. If you're a good public speaker, you're a good writer. It's about finding your voice.
Yeah, and most times, most people that we know of write and speak. Like Michael Wilburn writes and speaks.
You got to know how to do both.
They have to do, and they do both. They do like columns for Washington Post, and they get in front of the camera.
But what I would recommend to students trying to break into this business is to just continue to get the reps in for your writing skills to start with, because that made me become. That strengthened my voice. It allowed me to really find my voice, because even when you're writing, you can just imagine yourself saying it. Because while working at Mason Cable Network, a lot of what I had to do was write my own scripts. And so I wrote it in my own voice. That way I got comfortable with the reps, comfortable speaking in front of the teleprompter, and it all just came natural. So
writing, like you're in your mindset, this like this, you would say writing supersedes public speaking.
Correct.
Because it's an opportunity to get prepared and then you speak. Well, honestly, I need to take your note because I never write down any of my speeches, and I think when I do write down, let me say never. The times I've written down what I wanted to say have been better speeches. I just don't have the patience, so I agree with that. So all right, so we're at this conference. You know, you're networking. What are some of the things, you know, from this Get in the Game conference? What are some things that you've learned so far? You know, your takeaways from this conference. I know I've seen you taking lots of notes. You're in that journal. I was sitting right next to you in the session, writing down quotes and stuff. So, what was some big takeaways for you so far?
Oh man, honestly, one of the most common things I've heard from a lot of panelists was "you are where your feet are," and to me, what that meant was you're taking control of your journey. You know, everyone has a different journey. Everyone's journey is unique, but you are in control of what you want to do. And another thing that I'm learning is when networking, it's a small world. a lot of people that I've networked with here at Getting the Game.
Yeah.
A lot of them know people that I have networked with in the past
at other places,
right?
Yeah,
and so that gave me a reassurance, like, okay, I'm in the right community, I'm in the right space of where I need to be, and to just pursue my goals in the business of sports journalism.
Yeah, so you've learned get in where you fit in, control your destiny, but
right.
The world is so small. So like you met like people like, okay, I need to be cool and not a jerk because the world is that small. Like.
Yeah.
You met people because we were also at that other. We actually met Neil and Mark together at that conference in GW
at Sync.
Yeah, that's where we met. That's why I met them for the first time too, and now we're back at their conference. So like, we're seeing the same people over again.
And it's crazy how things like that work. And I even like what you said about who knows you, who can speak about you in a room that you're not in. Who has like people with big names who can talk about you in a different space. Yeah. That really stood out to me. Whenever you were doing your presentation, I noticed the guy in the back. He was just like, "Oh, I really like that," and I was trying to point that out to you, but you were locked in.
I was locked in.
But that was great. That really stuck to me.
Well, I mean, think about it. Who knows you? Like, I remember specifically when they were like, "Philip, we need a black student to." Well, they did say we want a black male student to be the podcast guest for Fire the Chronicle of Higher Ed. And it was like, I just text you like, you want to do it, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was like, I knew who you were. And so that's like one of those examples. Like, I knew you. You were my first thought in my head. I presented opportunity. And it happens like all the time for quotes and stuff. I'm like, yo, fill this out or fill out the survey. But then on the inverse, I'm only here at this conference because Neil and Mark knew me. Mm-hmm. And then they knew me and I invited you and Aaron. So it really does tie into like knowing people and then, creating new relationships with them.
Yeah, and I'm grateful. I'm really grateful for that because I never would have imagined like things like that could just bring us to more events and just expanding our knowledge to other people who look like us.
Yeah, and I think that's part. So let's do, one of my thoughts is being in this space, have you noticed is it the one and the only in the room? Have you, when you've gone to media stuff at large, is it more apparent? Like, we're in a mostly black space now. Mm-hmm. Mason is diverse, but I think you were the one, like, only on the Fourth Estate staff. How many black males were on the Fourth Estate staff?
Just me. With the Fourth Estate.
Okay, so have you noticed that in certain spaces so far, like the lack of diversity in the sporting world, or what?
For sure, especially, I mean, with journalism as a whole,
journalism
as a whole, yes, more so than just like with sports. Like when I'll go to other conferences, like last year I went to the Media Fest, and it was majority white males.
Yeah, okay.
And there wasn't as many. It was majority white males, yes, and so. When I'm in those spaces, it shows me that I still stand out, and that I need to just be. It motivates me. It motivates me to teach others about maneuvering through this business
and get in where you fit. Mm-hmm. So you saw that room, and so what was the second category you saw mostly? If it was white men, what was like number two?
Number two, definitely. I mean, white woman.
So male, female, white, then black male, black female, or like, what do you? Yeah, because I think when I look at spaces, let me just inverse that. So in higher ed, I work in career services. When I go to these national career services fair, it's mostly white women. If it's crossed, with a lot of directors tied, but still, out of all those groups, there's black females and then black males. I'm probably at the least group.
Right.
Black males is the least group. Is it similar in those spaces with that?
Yes,
like it'd be like white male, white female, black male as like the most.
Yes.
The rarest or whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
Okay. That's interesting. It's in different industries, like education and sports.
And again, that's just like with journalism as a whole. Now, when we narrow, if we were to narrow it down, I was saying higher ed
as a whole too. Yeah.
Yeah, and if we were to narrow it down to like sports journalism, you'll see a lot more minorities in like specifically with the sports beat or like with the culture beat, because those are the most common. Yes. Those are the most common areas that we like to cover, even like with news as well. So those are
sports and culture.
I would say those are the most common areas of where like minority groups in the business of journalism.
In that space. Now, I know, unofficial, I'll take it, your mentor, but who is someone that you gravitated that's actually in that space to get advice from and stuff?
In the space of journalism?
Yeah. And how'd you meet them?
That's a good question.
Or maybe
Honestly,
it's not maybe not a real mentor, but like who's someone you did chop it up with though?
If we're going back, I would say in the space to start with, Darren Haynes. He was with WUSA 9.
Okay.
He actually just moved he took a position in LA.
Okay.
Like last month.
How'd you meet him? At a conference?
So he actually used to go to my church.
There you go. Okay.
Yes, and so my mom or my dad, I can't remember. One of them met, chopped it up a little bit, and then they told him like, "Hey, my son's interested in covering sports. He wants to be a sports journalist." And then I got to shadow him in his station.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, and
when'd you do that? What year? What grade was that? In college or in high school?
That was in high school.
Nice.
And that was I think the end of my junior year, or
nice.
At some point maybe the beginning of my senior year. One of those two. But later along the line, I also had a professor in college, Marcella Robinson. She's also a Mason alum, and she works at Mason.
Marcella.
She worked in the same office, and that's when I realized, like, wow, it's a small world, especially with people. People of color in this space. It's just a small world. Like everybody knows each other.
Right.
And
I remember Marcella just from Black Alum, period.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a small world, and there's not that many of us, and that's one of the things that motivates me, and it's kind of like my drive to inspire, get in this space, represent, leave my mark, but also inspire others who want to get in the space, others who look like me who want to get in the space to just be themselves, just be outstanding.
That's crazy. It's also a small world, like you said, like very small world. And the alum and doing that and then just shadowing. And I think I remember one time I shadowed a dean. Like I was in grad school and I shadowed Charvis Campbell, who was the dean of like just the SciTech campus. And I shadowed Mark Kidd. Mark Kidd, who used to work at Mason, but now he was like the dean of the Nova Manassas campus. And he's like a day in the life, and I did it while I was in grad school. Not to say I'm anywhere near them in higher ed, but it was just really inspiring to see two people walk me around in higher ed. Was that same notion, like me walking around? I think it made me say, okay, I'll stay in this space. I was excited. Was that something that, like, now I'm thinking about, I was like, that was a pretty cool experience. Now I realize how influential that shadowing experience was.
Yeah, for sure. Shadowing makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Whenever you're just in the space and you get a feel of what the culture is like in that space, and then it's kind of like an introduction almost, I would say. Mm-hmm. You get kind of a taste of what it's like just being in the space, seeing what other people are doing with their roles. You may not know entirely, but you kind of get an idea. You get like a broad idea of what they're doing. And so that's always very important, because when I'm taking a new job, I always want to like know what I'm getting into. I'm a visual guy. I'm a visual learner. I have to see it to believe it. I'm one of those. I'm one of them.
Awesome. Well, we're at the part of the show called Shot for Shot. You get to ask me any random question. I get to ask you any random question. You want to go first, or I go first?
You can go first.
All right. So you saw my presentation earlier today about networking and visualization. And, Luffy D. Monkey, King of the Pirates. Mm-hmm. So what is your very ambitious goal that you was going to put it on the wax right now that you want to achieve? What is your Tahiti, as they say, your North Star?
So my Tahiti North Star, I would have to say, is just getting the most experience I can coming out of my undergrad.
So it's like, what's the destination? Experience of what then?
Oh, destination.
I'm talking about destination. I'm talking about
destination.
I'm talking about you were going to like, in 10 years, I will be this. That's it. I mean, life happens, but you want to still put that as your North Star.
So a sports reporter for a major news outlet.
Oh, and
whether that's ESPN, CBS, NBC Sports, either of those.
What sport would you like? What would be your sport you would love to cover the most?
honestly,
you got to get in where you fit in.
I'm
like,
right. So the thing about that is like you have to be open to covering a bunch of sports.
Yeah.
But the one that I would want to cover the most, I'd say I'm going to say this right now, but it may change in the future.
Of course,
right now I'll say basketball.
Yeah.
But in the future, I want to be able to cover like international sports, maybe like soccer or track and field, like the Olympics.
Ooh, yeah.
So I want to be more versatile into kind of what I'm covering.
Okay, so Olympics. What would be the most random Olympic sport you would want to cover?
Probably track and field.
Okay, that's not that random. I thought you was going to say like
or
curling.
Swimming, or curling.
Curling.
Curling could work too.
Have you ever watched curling?
I have.
Do you know like could you write an article on it? Because do you know the rules?
Oh, not really.
You'd figure it out.
But I would figure it out. I would just need to watch, do some research. But all I know is they have to get the metal thing in the circle without brushing it out.
They brush it. That makes the ice smooth. Mm-hmm. And then they
with the salt that they brush or whatever.
Oh, that's salt.
They brush. So they don't brush the actual metal thing. They brush the
pathway
salt around it.
Yeah,
right. So they can stabilize it and control where it's going. Otherwise, since it's on ice, it could just slip past that circle.
How about do you know how to keep score in tennis?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So are you saying
I'm gonna, for the most part, yes, but I wouldn't say I watched enough tennis, so that's why I haven't even like.
I just figured out the rule. Someone told me about it recently.
I think it's by like 15.
It's 15s, and then you're gonna have
15s.
Games and sets, and you have to win. You have to be like best out of 5 or whatever, and some are different.
I used to play Wii Sports, so that's the only reason.
I know how to do bowling. I know the scorekeeping in bowling.
Yeah,
but I don't know the scorekeeping in everything. So I think that would be like a challenge, right? Like how do you win in NASCAR? I guess I don't know how many laps. Some are 500. Some are. That's how they call it.
It depends on the race.
500 because it's 500 laps.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we learned something new. Okay, your question for me.
So with this, based on your experience with getting the game, we've been to a lot of conferences together, and you said like some were bittersweet, some were great, some were not so great. Where would you put this in the rankings of
conferences, experiences?
As far as like your expectations.
Expectations. I'd put this in the top 10%, and the only reason why it wasn't necessarily when I think about conferences, it's not a matter like you said. Experience is number one. Like learning sessions and all that stuff, they're all the same, right? It doesn't matter. That's not the main. Like you can go to stay at Mason and go to a conference. The main thing about conferences for me is building good relationships and like the social capital that comes out of it and the networking opportunities. And for me to see a conference like really dedicated to Black people in sports was very inspiring. To see all these young people that want to do it, that was really cool for my own presentation. But then, like, the mental health session yesterday, where it was like, I don't even think they really talked about sports at all. But that was just like, they were just dropping gems. That was my favorite session. They were talking about things that, like, I asked a question later, like,
Dr. Yeager was, he was a guru. Like, he was, I really liked what he was saying about having, all of his sons and playing professional football and all things like that.
And I think the only reason why they tied sports because he was a sports psychologist and he worked with athletes, but he didn't really talk about that much. He was just dropping gems about life. Yeah. And so I think that I would say this is in the top 10% of my own experiences. Also, additionally, my conference experience is usually attached to a person and not necessarily like the food or the amenities and all that. Yeah. And so Neil and Mark, just the fact that they wanted to put this on with, you said Yusuf as well. Yes. I don't know. I didn't get a chance to meet that gentleman, but the fact that this was organized by them on their own, like just they put it together and they wanted to help people. It just made it an experience that like was a really good experience because you could tell the heart of it was from people with good intentions that wanted to give opportunities to students and stuff like that. So I like it. Baltimore, I don't know. Baltimore, you can take it or leave it. No shade. Don't get me, but I enjoy smaller scale conferences where you get to talk to a lot of the people. Yeah. So I don't like these big national ones where you get lost in the sauce. And I like the ones where, like, you actually, I guess, maybe they're right, just get to engage with people. So I'm not a big fan of national. If this was like getting the game, a national conference for like everywhere in the United States, I think I would have been a little overwhelmed. But the fact that this is like a more regional one for HBCUs, mainly HBCUs in the East Coast area. Made it a very good conference.
Yeah, it was. I was definitely impressed, and this was their first year running this, but it definitely met. It definitely met my expectations. Yeah, for sure. So I was grateful for that.
Well, Jalen, this has been a great episode. This is the part of the show where I call shout-outs and plugs. Shout-out means you get to show love to anyone you want to show love, mom, dad, family, friends, whatever, show love. And then plugs. Now, plugs is a direct way, like things you're working on, things that I'll actually put in the show notes, things you're working on, ways that the listeners can follow up with you. So the stage is set. Shout-outs and plugs.
Well, shout-out to you, man. You got me here to this point. You got me to this. You told me about this conference. I wouldn't even be here if you didn't even reach out to me. So definitely wanted to shout out to you first, and shout out to Mr. Neil Schwartz, Mr. Yeager, and Mr. Sullivan for putting this together, getting the game conference. We greatly appreciate it, and we hope to continue to stay connected with you moving forward in all of our endeavors. And good luck to all of you in your endeavors. Plugging me in.
Yeah, dude, plug. Yeah, this is you. Ways that we can.
You all could find me on LinkedIn, Jalen Stubbs. I'm also on Instagram, JBOYSTUBBS. And then I'm also on Twitter, Jalen Stubbs _.
All right, I'll put all that in the show notes so those that want to connect and follow with Jalen can. And also, you can follow his writing too, because he usually posts all those writings on LinkedIn, IG, or Twitter. Well, Jalen, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. As you know, I'm really extremely proud of you, and this is just crazy. It's full circle moment. Positive Philter listeners, you know that every episode is dedicated to the late memory of my father-in-law, Jeff Kirsch, so please consider donating to the Jeff Kirsch Anti-Hunger Fund for all the work that he did with fighting food insecurity. If you like this episode, please share it with a family and friend. All these episodes are found on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Give this show a rating, a like, a review that helps elevate the podcast. But thank you so much for your support. Thank you for listening, listeners, and we're out. Thank you for listening to Positive Philter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.